Opposite Gloves here, and today we're going to be looking at how long should my beat be? How long should your song be? This is something that deeply troubled me when I was brand new because I saw these people that I really liked their music, and their music was like 5 minutes long or 10 minutes long. I was like, how do they write such long pieces of music? Am I doing something wrong? And it's good music the whole way through. I found out that if I try to do something like that, either it doesn't make that much sense, there were all sorts of problems I had as a new person. It sounded very repetitive, things of that nature. So what I found was, and this is pretty much how it is, the purpose behind your piece of music will determine its length. So if you're writing something to be an exercise, that's your purpose, then it's generally going to be about exercise length, which I find to be about 1.5 minutes, unless you're doing something that specifically needs a longer time. Most of the time when you're practicing something or you're writing a piece of music to emulate something else, I typically find that I end up around that range. So let me give you an example. So here I have this orchestral song I was working on. I know it's not a beat, but all the same principles apply, and I think it's a better example than a beat because it's got a lot more going on. So I was listening to a lot of television and movies over my break, and it sort of inspired me with this orchestral sound, and I was like, I want to make something like that. And so I'm not sitting here going, oh, I want to make a 10-minute piece of music where I'm going to plan out what I'm going to do. No, I'm just like, I'm going to sit down and just sort of let the things flow out of me based on the inspiration I've already had. This isn't that deep of the source. So naturally, it's not going to be that long. I could develop it and continue developing it, but the more beforehand thinking, the deeper your purpose is, generally the easier it's going to be to write out a longer piece of music without being repetitive or boring. So there's a trade-off too. Things that lend themselves to repetition, such as a 4-to-the-floor kick drum, they're very simple, but they repeat, and they can repeat forever and pretty much sound pretty cool depending on what you do around that. So that lends itself to being longer. Here, this is a great example of something that, because there's no real drum parts, it does not lend itself to being long without a lot more work. But in that 1 minute, it accomplishes what another song might take 4 minutes to accomplish. Granted, you can keep your listener with you that long. So my purpose was just an exercise. If you're writing background music or a beat for a commercial, for example, say you're writing for a 30-second commercial, your purpose has been defined as 30 seconds. That's like it. You have 30 seconds. It's been defined. So basically what I'm saying is, don't feel constrained by how long or short your song is. It's still art. It's still good. There's commercially viable songs and artistic viable songs of all lengths. So, I mean, we have jingles all the way down to like a jingle or just a click or a beep being an iconic sound, like on your cell phones or whatever, all the way to operas of hours and hours long, and other or pieces that are that long that present ideas. So it just comes down to your purpose. That's what I want to let you know when you're first writing out. Because when you're doing beats and stuff, you might be wondering, how long should I make this beat? Should I have a goal time? Should I shoot for 3 minutes? Because such and such, all his beats are 3 minutes long. The answer is no. You do you, and let your purpose drive the amount of time you should spend. So I'm going to play this for you. I want to give you but before I play it, I want to give you some listening direction. Pay attention to the themes and the development. So as things develop and change color, you'll notice it's a very colorful experience as a sound experience, and it takes you somewhere. And as a result, because of the mood and the methods I'm using to establish it, it does not lend itself, I feel, to continue on. I think I've accomplished what I want once I reach this point, and therefore I'm going to end it there. But I could continue on. I could add more and use more techniques and continue to move forward and find some additional themes. But what I do is I take some themes and I develop them, and I use the themes as my method of repetition. If I were to use a particular rhythm that's very repetitive in nature, I could continue on much easier. Now, the challenge is making it still interesting. So this is a very interesting piece as well. It's not something that you just kind of lull through and let it just sit in the background and you just feel it. This is something that you're kind of listening and you're actively engaged with the piece mentally. So I want you to listen to those and just determine the length of it, like if you would continue on, if you would not, if I ended in an appropriate spot. This is largely an opinion. Again, it was an exercise. Also, if there are any sample clicks or pops, it's just because the libraries are still loading, and these ones are very large libraries, and so sometimes they just don't play notes. And so if there are notes missing, I apologize. I'll probably go back and replay that one section as discreetly as possible so you get the idea of what was supposed to be there. I might just let it go if it wasn't that bad. So anyways, without further ado, pay attention to those things. That way you get something out of this experience. So here we go. So there you have it. That is the piece. And so let's really quick break down what happens, why it turned out the length it did. So before, I wasn't sitting there going, I'm going to write a 5-minute piece. I wasn't sitting there going, I'm not going to write a 5-minute piece, but I had an understanding when I started. I wasn't endeavoring to do some great work. So first I said, I need some chords. So I wrote down some chords and then I came up with the melody, which I was adjusting. I had adjusted this earlier based on different playback, and then I had to change it again. So the little brass was a little loud, but that was fine. So you got the idea though. We have a theme, and this theme, so I present it here in the solo horns. It sounds like this, right? There's also a trumpet in there. So they play through and they even form harmonies in a couple spots. It's really cool. And then I develop it here. This is sort of like where everything just sort of explodes and I introduce a new theme. So we have theme number 1. And that's the second thing that's going to determine how long stuff is. What are the ideas you give yourself to work with? So I've given myself a theme now, and I want to convert it into a sort of a counter theme. So I have that dun 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 dun, this section right here. And then that's going, and I have the strings doing a counter melody in the top, and that eventually be the trumpets fade into the background musically. They don't literally fade into the background. They don't get softer. And then the strings climb and climb and climb, and then it brings us to a reprise eventually over here. There's a variation right here. So this would be called our development, this whole midsection right here. And then we have a reprise. A reprise just means I'm recapping a theme. So I've taken us from a theme presented in one voice and one instrument, so like French horns and the trumpets, and then I give them a different role, a role that is often contrary to the first role. So this is sort of a long thing, and this is like a short, like dun 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 dun. The strings are supporting us the whole way through. So I've given myself 2 themes, essentially. I use these themes to mess around with the color of the orchestra, and then I finish it with the same theme, only this time I'm restating what I did. It's a reprise, but with different voices. So I'm using a whole bunch of bell sounds in the piano, that kind of a thing. With there's pizzicato in there and a Glock in there too, if you pick it out, but they're mostly just color chord tones. But anyways, you get the idea. The length of the piece was determined by its purpose and by what I was doing here with the themes. This is a lot more work too. You notice there's notes everywhere. There's CC automation everywhere. I mean, it's just the greatest thing ever. So if you're wondering what so it's like these things. These are the dynamics, for example, of the strings. You can see where I varied them a little bit. And there's also velocity movement, so that's not a fair representation of everything that's going on. The same way the faders are represented in like 5 spots on each channel strip, especially if you use plugs. So it's not a fair look to judge someone's mix by just glancing at their mixer, which a lot of people do. So let's go ahead and go to a piece that's now longer in length and explain the differences. So this piece is called I Speak French, Do You? Okay, so here we are. I anticipate this being actually quite a bit louder. This is a much longer piece, as you can see. It is 3 minutes and 45 seconds long, and it uses different techniques. It's actually less dense color-wise, so there's a lot less instruments, a lot less notes to worry about. It's more about larger ideas at a scale. So this is one that I did sit down. I'm like, I'm going to write a song, and I have a friend who speaks French, and I had him speaking French on my beat. And I wrote this on my laptop, so I'm not sure if I'm missing any elements. I don't believe I am. And this is, I'll just really quick play a sections of it for you, because the themes are repetitive. Because it lends itself to repetition better, it will lend itself to a longer piece easier. But I wanted to keep it interesting, and that's what the voice is for, and the drop sections, where most of my work, where I spend a lot more time working on things. So here it is.
Bienvenue à Wonderland. Je vais te montrer quelque chose que tu vas aimer. Suis-moi. Je vais te montrer quelque chose que tu vas aimer. Je te dis, bienvenue à Wonderland.
Yeah, I'm missing pieces right there. There's a whole bunch missing right there. But that's fine. You can go listen to the actual track. But you get the idea. We have the voice comes in. We have our 4/4 kick. And then, let's skip to right here.
Papa, bienvenue à Wonderland.
There's stuff missing here too, but that's not a big deal. You get the idea though. I've presented a theme and I've presented a melody. I give myself a version 1 of the melody, then a version 2. There's actually a drop there with a couple other elements that fill out the track a bit more. And you can see the playthrough. I believe it's on my YouTube channel under the tracks playlist. But we have now determined the length of the piece. I've given myself this theme. I've given myself this theme. And this is a much longer theme, and it encapsulates an idea. So this is a much easier thing to do because it contains an idea. We're talking about Wonderland and the idea behind it, or not necessarily the idea behind it, but attributes of a Wonderland. And so we go through here. We have our breakdown. We have our drop. And it's a chiller drop. It's not like a huge, massive drop, which is one of the appealing parts of it, I think. And so we go through and I restate a lot of these ideas and develop them a little bit here. And because of the nature of the rhythm and how it's like a driving forward kick drum thing, or 4/4 beat, it lends itself to just moving, just chugging right on through. And so after I reach here, now it's a structural thing. So I recap another idea, an idea from before.
Parlez-vous français? Je pense pas. T'inquiète pas, je vais te montrer comment c'est.
See, we're going along the same lines. Sounds very similar to the beginning. In fact, one might say like the same. And then I ended out with actually the drop. I take what I had already going and I finish it off with that material. But the ideas are much longer and bigger. And my goal when I sat down was bigger. And so I knew I was going to want to develop these different ideas. This isn't one. There is some sound design going on. It's not terribly complicated, just some like saw waves and stuff. But it's still very tonally centered. But it's got, so this one is a good example of something that's rhythmically and melodically, the melody and the rhythm work together really well. A lot of times you'll see one receive a lot of emphasis, and that's what makes something so cool. This is one where they both receive just a huge amount of emphasis in a way that doesn't detract from the other, which can be difficult to accomplish sometimes. I'll start pieces and then end up just trashing them because they I've put too much emphasis on one side than the other. But anyways, the moral of the story, whether your beat is 30 seconds long, 4 bars long, or an entire piece long, it's still art and you can still use it. You're not doing anything wrong. You just have different ideas. Look at your purpose behind why you're doing it. If you're doing it because you're bored, don't expect to write some great massive thing. You should sit down instead and find a better reason. Find like, oh, I want to display this idea, or I want to use these techniques with this developed form. And then you'll find yourself creating much longer pieces. Granted, you can identify the techniques you need to use to do it. So like I'm using, besides the theme here, I'm also using sound design. I'm using structure. I'm using counterpoint. Well, not really counterpoint in this example, not deliberately anyways, but I have elements that vibe off one another and things of that nature. Counterpoint's a whole nother deal. I don't even know why I mentioned that, but you get the idea. I'm using ideas to propel my simple notions, my simple ideas further. So I'm using ideas to propel our ideas further. Anyways, you get the idea. Pay attention to your purpose, your themes, and the techniques you want to use, and just have fun. Don't worry about how long something is, especially when you're doing exercises. So my challenge to you is I want you to make a beat that's 30 seconds long and accomplishes some goal that you have. Maybe you want to make it sound like a car commercial. That'd be a fun one. Do a car commercial and then do a longer beat. Maybe you want to, now if you don't have vocalist capabilities for whatever reason, you don't have a mic or something, then write out something that's got a jam and solo section or something with just a neat melody behind a drum loop. It doesn't need to be the most complicated thing in the world. Like this honestly is not super duper complicated. This is a pretty simple thing. It's the complicated part's getting the simple things to play together well and make something larger that can still be broken down into its parts and you can hear each one, but then you see the larger vision at hand. That's the hard thing. So when you're making your beat, don't worry about getting all complicated and stuff. Just make something simple. You saw some of the other ones that had like 3 lines, a MIDI drum loop, a sub bass, and then a melody. Just do something like that. Make it longer and pay attention to your themes. Then make a video showing them and explain the differences between them. I think it'd be so cool to see how different people went about overcoming different challenges. Like what ideas did you have to get through? Did you get writer's block? How'd you beat it? That kind of a thing. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.